So I think that kind of it gives people a very good kind of overview of the kind of creativity, and hopefully sort of shows a different side, or shows the way that protests and demonstrations have a creative side, you know, and they're not just kind of about the issues and the obvious things that people think about, petitioning and demonstrating on the streets, you know, that there's all these other elements to it and the way that creativity is involved in it. Okay, well, I'm part of the room A World Where Many Worlds Fit, which is a room of activist artists who've been involved in the, some people call it the anti-capitalist movement, some people call it the global justice movement, some people call it the altermondialisation movement. It's kind of got many names, but the movement of movements against kind of capitalist globalization. And all the work that I'm showing has been part of, I've worked as an artist and a designer and a political activist within that movement, and kind of tried to tie my creativity into the movement. So in a sense, it's not aimed at an art audience necessarily, it's to be part of the movement and part of the creativity in the movements, which is, I think, a very important part of the movements, which is what the room, I think, tries to show. So that's the work I'm showing is a combination of about 8 years of different projects, some art projects, some sort of posters and agitprop work, which fits in with a longer tradition of people like John Hartfield in the past, or posters that came out of May '68 in Paris and the general strike there, and then things like book designs, which is about the movement as well, which is another facet of my work. So it brings together everything from like the last 8 years, which is the first time I've ever brought all that work together. So it's actually the first time it's all been shown as a collective body. I mean, I think what will be interesting for people here is to see the stuff, because I mean, I actually don't think it's actually ever been shown in Europe together, you know. And I think, well, I mean, although I know that in Korea the movement has been very active, you know, I don't think people will necessarily be aware of a lot of the things that went on. So I think that kind of it gives people a very good kind of overview of the kind of creativity. And hopefully sort of shows a different side, or shows the way that protests and demonstrations have a creative side, you know, and they're not just kind of about the issues and the obvious things that people think about, petitioning and demonstrating on the streets, you know, that there's all these other elements to it and the way that creativity is involved in it. So yeah, I think, you know, and I think, and obviously you hope that, because the nature of my stuff certainly, and I think some of the other work, is that, you know, it will make people think about the world that they live in, and think about why the world is so unequal, and why capitalism is causing so many problems, and now the problems of climate change, as well as economic inequality and war, and hopefully kind of make people think. I mean, I'm not thinking that people don't already know about those things, but it's about trying to make it more obvious and expose the contradictions more. And I mean, for instance, in the show, I've got a piece, a pack of cards that are called "Regime Change Begins at Home," which have been very popular. They've sold about 20 or 30,000 copies around the world, and they satirise the cards that the American army gave out in Iraq. So they gave out cards with all the Iraqi people that they wanted captured, and they were on this pack of cards. So we did a pack of cards with all the people we think are the real problem, all the warmongers and the profiteers in the world. And if you look on the cards in the exhibition, it has pictures of all the people, so the heads of the World Bank, the heads of various governments, the heads of the arms manufacturers, and it explains why we think, there's a little bit of quote underneath each card which explains why we think they're bad people. So it's kind of it has an educational aspect to it, but I don't, hopefully not in a patronising way, in a way that genuinely enlightens people.